بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. قال الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآل. The 25th of Shawwal marks the martyrdom anniversary of Imam Jafar ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the 6th Imam of Ahlul Bayt, and the Imam who his legacy and his hadith has impacted the Muslim identity and the Shi'i identity in a way that the other Imams have not. Scholars mention that we have over 65,000 hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and from the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt. From Rasulullah, Imam Ali, Fatima al-Zahra, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, all the way until Imam al-Mahdi. Over 65,000 hadith. Most of those hadith, over half of those hadith, go back to Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So the role of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam is and was very great in influencing the Muslim identity and the Shi'i identity. And this is why, my dear brothers and sisters, when it comes to the events of the Ahlul Bayt alayhum salam, whether it's a happy event, the birth of the Imam, or the martyrdom of the Imam, we need to strengthen our ma'rifah. We need to get to know the Imams better. We need to strengthen our ma'rifah with the Imams. You ask some people, who are the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt? And they don't know them. They don't know the names of the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt. The least thing is just knowing the Imams by their names. You know, when you go and you bury someone, the last thing that we do before you pour the soil on the grave is you do the talqeen. And in the talqeen, we mention the names of the Imams, because we will be asked about the Imams and their names in the afterlife, in the akhirah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will ask us, who did you take your faith from? Who did you take your religion from? And we have to have an answer. Who is your Imam? Some people, they'll say, my Imam was, LeBron James. My Imam was this actor and this actress. Because that's the person that they were looking up to. That's the person that they were watching and following, and they know every detail about their lives. But then you come and you ask them, what about your religion? Who do you take your religion from? There's no answer. We need to strengthen our ma'rifah. We need to strengthen our knowledge, our ma'rifah, our faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is strengthened when we know God, when we know the Prophet of God, Rasulullah, when we know the Quran, and when we know our Imams, we take our religion from them. You take your religion, your faith, and your values from the Imams. So you have to get to know them. This is why the hadith says from Imam Abu Ja'far, Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. And this is narrated from Abu Hamza al-Thumali. He mentions a hadith from Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, إِنَّمَا يَعْبُدُ اللَّهِ مَنْ يَعْرُفُ اللَّهِ. The one who truly worships God is the one who knows God. If you don't know God, if you don't know your Lord, then how are you going to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? إِنَّمَا يَعْبُدُ اللَّهِ مَنْ يَعْرُفُ اللَّهِ. And then he says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ لَا يَعْرُفُ اللَّهِ فَإِنَّمَا يَعْبُدْ هَكَذَا ضَلَالًا. The one who does not know God, then their worship is a worship in vain. You see many people, they worship. They're praying up and down, ruku', sujood, up and down, but they don't know what their religion means. They don't even know who they're worshiping. They don't have a clue who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Like the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. Some of them, they were praying, they were fasting, they were going to Hajj, but they were killing the prophets and the children of the prophets. This is not a good type of worship. So then the Imam, the companion, Abu Hamza al-Thimali, he asks Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. He tells him, جُعِلْتُ فِدَاكَ فَمَا مَعْرِفَةُ اللَّهِ. He tells him, may my soul be sacrificed for you. What is the ma'rifah of Allah? You say that a key ingredient to worshiping God is ma'rifah of Allah. What is ma'rifatullah? How do I have the ma'rifah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And then the Imam alayhi salam, he tells him, tasdeequllah azza wa jal. You have to accept the words and the orders of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Wa tasdeeq rasulihi sallallahu alayhi wa alih. And you have to accept the message of the Prophet. And when you're a Muslim, you say, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Meaning that you bear witness that Prophet Muhammad is the messenger of God. Meaning anything that Prophet Muhammad tells you, this is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You find some people, they come and they say, no, I don't want to do such and such because that's not mentioned in the Quran. It has to be mentioned in the Quran. We tell you, okay, Rasulullah is the one who talked about it. Rasulullah said this in a hadith. And they reject the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And then the Imam alayhi salam, he says, وَمُوَالَاتْ عَلِيٍّ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ وَالْإِئْتِمَامَ بِهِ وَبِأَئِمَّةِ الْهُدَى عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ. In addition to tasdeeq Allah, accepting what God tells you, accepting what Rasulullah tells you, then you have to have wilaya, wila. What does wala mean? Muwalat. Muwalat means you don't only love the Ahlul Bayt. Today all Muslims, they say we love the Ahlul Bayt. Muwalat means you love the Ahlul Bayt and you take your religion from them. Some people today, they say, I love the Ahlul Bayt, but I take my religion from the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. No. وَمُوَالَاتِ عَلِيٍّ عَلَيْهِ السَّلَامِ وَالْأَئِمَّةِ الْهُدَاةِ عَلَيْهُمُ السَّلَامِ وَالْبَرَاءَ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلْ مِنْ عَدُوِّهِمْ. And you have to associate yourself and disassociate yourself from their enemies and associate yourself with the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam. And then the Imam says, هَكَذَا يُعْرَفُ اللَّهِ. That's how you know God. You want to know God? You want to worship God? You accept the Quran. You accept the words of God. You accept Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. You accept Ali ibn Abi Talib and the Imams, the rightful Imams from the children of Ali ibn Abi Talib. You associate yourself with them and you disassociate yourself with the enemies of the Ahlul Bayt. That is how you know God. This is according to Imam al-Baqir alayhi salam. So my dear brothers and sisters, today we want to get to know more about Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. As we mentioned, over half of the narrations that we have, over 65,000 narrations we have, over half of them, they go back to Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And Imam Jafar al-Sadiq had a very important role in developing and molding the identity of the Muslims and the identity of the Shi'i school of thought. First of all, as for his role in developing the identity of Muslims, we know that Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam was a teacher and he was a scholar of his time who was not only a scholar for the Shia. Today, some people, they say, okay, there are scholars, there are Shi'i scholars, there are Sunni scholars, there are Hanafi scholars, there are Maliki scholars, there are Hanbali scholars, Hanafi scholars. You go and you follow the scholar that you believe in. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he was a scholar of all the Muslims. He used to teach in the masjid of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alihi and in Medina, and people from all over the Muslim world, they used to come and seek knowledge from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So you had some individuals who would come and learn from the Imam who did not accept the Ahlul Bayt, meaning that they were not Shia, but they would still learn from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam because he was an ocean of knowledge. He used to teach people. This is why one of the main students of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq was who? Abu Hanifa. Today, the Sunni school of thought, within the Sunnis, there are 4 major fiqh schools of thought, jurisprudence schools of thought, scholars of fiqh. The Hanbali, the Hanafi, the Maliki, and the Shafi'i. Now, these schools of thought, they were developed during the time of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam and after. So today some people, they come and they say we're following Rasulullah and we have the hadith of Rasulullah. No, these scholars, they came hundreds of years after Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. And in fact, these scholars, like for example, 2 of them, Abu Hanifa, the leader of the Hanafi school of thought, he studied for 2 years under Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. 2 years he would seek knowledge from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he has a famous statement where he says, لَوْلَا السَّنَتَانِ لَهَلَكَ النُّعْمَانِ. If it was not for the 2 years, An-Nu'man, referring to himself, An-Nu'man ibn Thabit, would have perished if it was not for those 2 years. Same with Malik. Al-Imam Malik, who was in Medina, the leader of the Maliki school of thought. He was a student of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And he says, my eyes have not seen anyone more pious, more truthful, more honest, a greater worshipper than Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. And the other 2 leaders, al-Shafi'i and Hanbali, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, they came later. They came after the death of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, but they all were inspired by the knowledge of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, his birth and his life and his death should be something that is commemorated by all Muslims. In fact, all Muslims are indebted to the teachings of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. In fact, you don't even have to be a Muslim to be indebted to Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq. You don't have to be a Muslim to appreciate the legacy and the offering of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, one of his top students, he had over 4,000 students that would narrate his hadith. They would sit in the masjid and they would say, سَمِعْتُ مِنْ سَيِّدِي وَمَوْلَاي جَعْفَرَ بن Muhammad al-Sadiq. I heard my master Ja'far al-Sadiq say, and they would say the hadith. And the knowledge of Imam al-Sadiq was not knowledge only concerning the Quran and Salah and Zakat and Hajj and Islamic issues. No. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he would teach people astronomy. He would teach people astrology. He would teach people physics. He would teach people medicine. He would teach people chemistry. One of the leaders of chemistry, a scholar by the name of Jabir ibn Hayyan. Jabir ibn Hayyan, he is known as the father of modern day chemistry. We are all in need of chemistry. The medicine that you take, it goes back to chemistry. Anything that you do, you go to the doctor, it has to do with chemistry. Jabir ibn Hayyan, he was a student of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, and he wrote a treatise on chemistry. And in the beginning, he says, سَمِعْتُ مِنْ سَيِّدِي وَمَوْلَاي جَعْفَرَ بن Muhammad al-Sadiq, and then he talks about the laws of chemistry. This was over 1,200, 1,300 years ago. This is the knowledge of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. So Imam al-Sadiq is not just an Imam for the Shia, Imam for the Ja'fari, Shi'i Muslims. No, Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq, he had an impact on Muslims, and he had an impact on non-Muslims. Anyone who's into the sciences, anyone who has benefited in one way or another from sciences, this person is indebted to the life of Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam was born in the year, he passed away in the year 148 after Hijrah, and he was born in the year 80 after Hijrah, or 83, there's a difference in opinion. So he was born during the time of Imam Zayn al-Abidin alayhi salam, and his father is Imam al-Baqir. And he mentions to us that the hadith of Imam Zayn al-Abidin, he also narrated it. Today, one of the greatest legacies of Imam Sajjad, Imam Zain al-Abidin alayhi salam, is Sahifa al-Sajjadiyah. This book of dua, Sahifa al-Sajjadiyah. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he says, he brings out the Sahifa al-Sajjadiyah from his house. They come and they ask him. He brings it out. He tells his son Ismail, go bring me the scrolls. He brings it out and then he looks at it. He tells his companions, Hada, the Sahifa al-Sajjadiyah, the book of du'as of Imam Zain al-Abidin. He says, Hada khat abi. These are the writings, the handwriting of my father, Imam al-Baqir. Wa imla jaddi, and the oral recitation of my grandfather, Imam Zain al-Abidin, and it happened in front of my eyes. It was written in front of my eyes. So Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he delivers to us the knowledge of Imam Zain al-Abidin and Imam al-Hussein, Imam al-Hasan, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Rasulullah. And because of the opportunity that was given to him, he had the freedom to deliver. He had the freedom to educate people. He had the freedom to teach people the knowledge. And people would travel all over the world. They would travel within the Muslim empire just to learn from Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Now, one of the reasons why Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam has a greater impact on the Shi'i identity, and you see his name more, many times we say the hadith, Imam al-Sadiq said this and Imam al-Sadiq said that. Why? Because Imam al-Sadiq had relative freedom. Because he was living during a time where there was the fall of one government and the rise of another government. And that was the fall of the Umayyad government, the Umayyad dynasty. They fell. It started with Muawiyah and it died during the life of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. And then there was the rise of the Abbasi dynasty. So during that time in between, there was some relative freedom. One government falls, another government rises. So there was some chaos, there was some relative freedom during that time. And Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he took those few years as an opportunity to educate people, as an opportunity to teach people. And he would sit in the masjid and people would come from all over the world and they would learn from him. Now, Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, of course, today when you read about Islamic history and the Abbasi era especially, you learn about the Islamic golden era, the golden age. There was a time during the rule of the Abbasis that was described as the golden age. You know, the first surgeries were performed by the Muslims. Medicine performed by the Muslims. A lot of the advancements of knowledge and education were where the Muslims are. You know how right now people travel, they leave the Middle East, they leave the lands of the Muslims to come to the West, they come to the United States to seek knowledge. At that time, it was the other way around. At that time, people, they would go to the Muslims to seek knowledge. And they were very advanced in their skills. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he had a huge impact on that golden age. And he educated people. And one of the things that the Imam alayhi salam would do, he would say a hadith and he would encourage his students to write down. At that time, during the time of Rasulullah and before that, it was an oral culture. No one used to write. No one used to read or write. They used to just hear something, rely on memory, and then pass it down, and pass it down, and pass it down. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he tells his companions, his students, he tells them, when I tell you a hadith, I want you to write it down. Because if you don't write it down, you're going to forget it. And then this is how the legacy of the Imam has been preserved. This is why until today, our scholars, the mujtahideen, the maraji', they go and they read the hadith of Imam al-Sadiq, and then that's how they derive Islamic laws. As we mentioned, the Imam alayhi salam would teach different subjects. He would teach fiqh, jurisprudence. He would teach kalam, the science of theology, proving God, and debating with atheists, debating with those people who do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He would teach anatomy, the human body. one of the books, one of the students of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq by the name of Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar. This book is still around today. Al-Mufaddal ibn Umar was a student of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. He says, I go to Medina, next to the grave of Rasulullah, there was an atheist next to the grave of Rasulullah, and he's telling people, how are these people worshiping? How are these people praying and believing in God? There's no such a thing as God. And no one was able to answer that atheist. So Mufaddal ibn Umar, he goes to Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. Imam Sadiq tells him, sit and start writing down. The Imam alayhi salam doesn't come and use theological arguments to argue the existence of God. The Imam alayhi salam, he talks about the human anatomy. He talks about the respiratory system. He talks about the blood circulation within the body. He talks about the heart and the eyes and the mind and the brain and the bones and the skin and all of these things. And then he tells him who created all of that. He comes and he uses that argument. And this is a very important book by the name of Tawheed al-Mufaddal, which I recommend you to look into. A book by the student of Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Another very important point regarding Imam Sadiq alayhi salam is that the Imam was very tolerant of different opinions. Today, you find some people, if someone has an opinion that is a little bit different from them, even within the Shi'as, but one, for example, follows a different marja', or one, for example, has a different view regarding something. Right away, this person, they talk bad about them, they accuse them, they attack them, and they don't want to associate with them. This is wrong, my dear brothers and sisters. If you have strong conviction in your faith, then you're not going to be threatened by different views. You're going to feel stronger when there are different views. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he was not just tolerating, he was encouraging of his students to come. Different students, let them come, and then he would talk with them. And many of them, they would become Shi'as once they sit with the Imam, and once they talk to the Imam, once they debate with the Imam. Some of the atheists, some of those individuals who do not even believe in God. We have, there are many ahadith where the Imam alayhi salam, he debates with atheists and agnostics. He debates with them. They don't believe in them. One of them, Abu Shakir al-Daysani. There's several that they would go to the Imam and they would debate with the Imam. The Imam didn't tell them, I'm going to cut your head off and get away from me and, I don't tolerate you. No. The Imam alayhi salam, he would talk to them. Some of them, they would be convinced, and others, their prejudice and their arrogance would stop them. But the Imam alayhi salam, he would talk to them. The Imam alayhi salam, he would educate them. And this was the Imam alayhi salam. Another very important point is that Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, he would encourage his students to give fatwa and teach other people. And today we have the system of taqleed and the system of ijtihad, where right now we don't have access to the imams, but we follow the scholars. This system, it was started during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam, where he tells his companions, he tells, for example, Zurara, he tells Muhammad ibn Muslim, he tells some of these companions, he tells them, sit in the masjid and give fatwa. Now their fatwa, of course, it's the same opinion as the Imam alayhi salam. Sometimes they would use the basic concepts that the Imam alayhi salam would give them. For example, Imam al-Sadiq, he wouldn't just always tell people, they ask people, is this, for example, tahir, is this najis? What do I do in this? Sometimes he would set the foundation. He would set a rule. Once you set a rule, then you could come and apply that rule even 100 years later, even 1,000 years later. For example, this is a rule by the Imam alayhi salam. كل شيء لك طاهر حتى تعلم أنه نجس. This is a very important rule that saves our lives, that saves many troubles in our lives. Today there are some people, they have waswas, this feeling of, this is najis, I can't touch this, I can't touch that. And they live this life of misery. I know some people, they message me every day, this is najis and this is tahir, I don't know if I did my wudu, this and that. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, كل شيء لك طاهر. Everything is pure Unless you know it's najis. For example, you go to your school and you see a bench, you see a table. Can you go? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. You go and you see a table. Are you allowed? Is this tahir or is this najis? Did you see it become najis? You didn't see it become najis. Therefore, it's tahir. This rule saves so much, headache. Another rule that the Imam alayhi salam set that is very important until today. He tells them, لا تنقض اليقين بالشك وانقضه بيقين آخر. Meaning that if you have certainty, if you have yaqeen, if you have certainty, and then you have shak, you have doubt, you don't remove the yaqeen, which is certainty, with doubt. You have to remove the certainty with another certainty. Let me give you an example. You did wudu and then you left the house. You performed wudu and then you left the house. Now, 2 hours later, you say, do I have wudu or do I not have wudu? You forgot. You have doubt. Do you have wudu or do you not have wudu? Here, the rule of the Imam comes into play. لا تنقض اليقين بالشك. If you are certain that you did wudu before you left your house, now you don't know whether you lost wudu or did not lose wudu. Which one is more important? Which one is heavier? Certainty. So you go back to your certainty and you ignore the doubt. This goes the other way around as well. Sometimes you know you woke up and you don't remember doing wudu. You are sure that you were sleeping and you did not do wudu. Then you say, did I do wudu or did I not do wudu after I left the house? I don't remember doing wudu. Here you go back to the certainty that you don't have wudu. This is a rule that's called istishab. You go back to assume the continuity of what you are certain. And this is a very important rule. This was a rule that was established by the Imams of the Ahlul, especially Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam. Of course, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he was teaching his people. But yes, once the Abbasi government came and they took power once again, their power became stronger. The Abbasi government, they started closing in on the Imam and the freedom of the Imam began to go away. And they began to harass the Imam. They began to abuse the Imam. And there were many spies around the house of the Imam. And even the companions of the Imam, they did not have freedom to go and visit the Imam. I was reading a hadith. It says that a man, he had an issue. He had an important question. And this was in Iraq, in Al-Hira, where the Imam was staying for a while. He says, he wanted to go see the Imam, but there were so many authorities from the government that were monitoring the house of the Imam. So what does this man do? This man, he sees a man selling cucumber, selling khiyar, cucumber. He goes and he tells him, let me take your cart of cucumber. He buys it from him. He takes the cart of the cucumber and he goes, he's acting like a person who's selling cucumbers. He goes slowly, slowly, slowly. He's pushing the cart. He goes next to the house of the Imam. Until the companions of the Imam, they realize that this person is trying to come closer to the house of the Imam. So he asks a question. He goes and he asks his question and then he leaves. He had to pose as a cucumber salesman in order to get closer to the house of the Imam. This is how difficult it became for some of the followers of the Imam. And it became very difficult for the Imam himself. One day, as-Saffah, they call him as-Saffah because of so many people he killed. He was one of those people. He was, the first leader of the Abbasi government. As-Saffah, it was the 30th of Ramadan, day 30 of Ramadan, meaning it's still Ramadan, but the government of the Abbasis, they declared Eid. The problem of Eid and Hilal and Eid and all that was a problem that has been going on for over 1,000 years. It's not something new. The government, the Abbasi government, they declared Eid on the 30th of Ramadan when it was still Ramadan. Saffah, he comes to the Imam and he tells the Imam, are you going to eat or are you not going to eat? The Imam alayhi salam, he takes food and he begins to eat in front of as-Saffah. And then once as-Saffah leaves, they tell him, Yabna Rasulullah, what did you do? You told us it's Ramadan, but you broke your fast. The Imam alayhi salam, he says, Aftar yawm, ثم أعيده أفضل من أن تضرب عنقي. He says, I break my fast and then I make it up is better for me than my neck being struck by the sword. This is the taqiyya that the Imam had to live in. And the Imam would tell his followers, you have to practice taqiyya. He would tell them, man la taqiyyata lah, la deena lah. Whoever does not practice taqiyya, this person does not have faith. And my dear brothers and sisters, if it was not for the Imams of the Ahlul Bayt telling their followers to practice taqiyya, there would be no Shi'i left today. There would be no Shi'i left today. Because the Imams told their followers to practice taqiyya, sometimes in order to preserve your faith, sometimes you have to do certain things, then that is how the tashayyu' continued. The authorities, they kept harassing and abusing the Imams. Over 7 times, the government, they would call the Imam in the middle of the night. They would call him, they would tell him, you know, what's the Khalifa had insecurities until they burned the house of the Imam. They summoned the Imam many times and until they poisoned the Imam alayhi salam. Imam Jafar al-Sadiq alayhi salam, the authorities, they came and they threw fire in his house. And this is فعن المفضل ibn Umar. قال, he says that فألقي النار في دار أبي عبد الله. The fire was thrown in the house of Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam. فأخذت النار في الباب والدهليز. The fire burned the door and the walkway in the house. فخرج أبو عبد الله عليه السلام يتخطى النار ويمشي فيها ويقول أنا ابن أعراق الثرى أنا ابن إبراهيم خليل الله. I am the one who I come from the family of Rasulullah. I am from the descendants of Ibrahim who was thrown in the fire. Then the Imam alayhi salam, he sits, he cries. They tell him, why are you crying? Are you crying because your belongings were burnt? He tells them, I'm crying because I remembered the family of Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam, who their women and their tents and the camp of Aba Abdullah was also set on fire. And there was no man to help them, no one to be there for them. Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salam, he was poisoned. And he passed away on the 25th of Shawwal. He passed away. He was buried in Medina, in the Baqi'. His son Imam Musa ibn Jafar buried him. The Muslims, they came out to bury the Imam alayhi salam. But there was one man who his body was left on the sand dunes of Karbala for 3 days. That was Aba Abdullah al-Hussein alayhi salam. لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى آله الطاهرين.